Good morning, everyone. Wonderful to be back here and welcome back. Right. Can you get the third slide on the screen? Professor's third slide. With all the transitions. Perfect. Thanks. Okay. So in this session, let's all come on the same page in terms of what do we mean by finance and how finance will be an integral part of this entire strategy for the strategy to be successful, right? So let us first get the jargon right so that all of us are on the same page. Finance is not lending alone. Lending is one dimension of finance. So whenever we are talking about finance, all the instruments that can contribute to lubricate this entire system can be factored into. Could be grants, could be soft funding, could be bridge funding, lending, and the associated products that can go beyond lending. So what we will explore, and I would like to bring our dimension of the debit credit dimension. When I say our, the debit credit dimension of what does it take to make this particular engine get lubricated and become a reality, right? So let's put the focus on the VPC, Village Processing Center, because in my perspective, we'll deliberate more, making that a viable and profitable unit would be the crux of the success of this entire model, because that's where the rubber meets the road. And one of the objectives indeed is how can we make the Village Processing Center a viable unit would determine what is the role that the rest of the ecosystem should play to make it happen. So first and foremost, whenever we look at finance, let us look at where would it start. And if I can go with the sequence of how the narrative got built, we started with the VPC and the farmer getting a fair price for the produce. That can happen when two things happen. One, we have access to the markets which give fair price. Second, we have access to tools that can make this price a reality, both in the spot market as well as in the processed markets, right? So from a lender's perspective, if I can take a look at what makes it happen, is the philosophy of risk management. We often talk about risk management. How do I protect myself from my borrower whenever we talk about risk management from a lender's perspective? But the reality is, whether you are protected by a collateral or any other means of risk mitigant, the fact remains that when my borrower is exposed to a risk, I am definitely exposed to that risk. I may mitigate myself, but I cannot do away with that or get away with that rather. So the best way to manage the risk of a lender in the context of such models, very important, in the context of such models, is how do I manage the risk of my borrower? When you manage the risk of your borrower is when your risk is automatically mitigated. So we have to understand what are the risks that the Village Processing Center is exposed to and construct the rest of the model based on that, right? And what are the rest of the constituents? One is the FPO. That is where the setting up of the unit starts. And setting up the unit is, as per the narrative, through soft funding. And we have host of tools that are available in the soft funding, whether it is Agri Infrastructure Fund, whether it is PMFMB, or several schemes that are there for the setting up of both the village level enterprises, the entrepreneurship by the local villagers as one dimension, or creation of infrastructure in agriculture being the other dimension. How do we bring all the schemes to culminate at the FPO? We have to still debate whether the FPO should own it and then lease it out, or should we also get a VLE to get in directly in terms of setting that up, because we have to weigh the relative merits of both. But the objective being, can we get a well-functioning machinery at the cheapest of the capex, not expensive, in a way that makes the financing viable at scale. Again, mind you, we are looking at a figurative number of 100,000 such VPCs. 100,000 VPCs have to be at an affordable capex so that it gets replicated. Now, let us peel this onion, because we have been talking about onions. Yesterday also, Isan, the gentleman, was talking about onions over lunch. Let's peel this onion a little bit. When it comes to softer funding, the role that financial entities can play is the role of a catalyst. Because most of these schemes are designed to be on reimbursement basis with good intention. The reimbursement basis being you first incur that cost and make a submission that, hey, I have incurred the cost and then I need the money to be reimbursed, give it back. But then the dimension of who will put the money first for the reimbursement comes into picture. You can look at it from two dimensions. One, the end use is being taken care of. And second, the release of money happens in a staged manner so that there is no burden of the interest on the borrower. Both well-intentioned structural requirements. But from the dimension of a village level entrepreneur or an FPO for that matter, because we have been working in the FPO space for the last 8 years, this reimbursement puts a lot of pressure on the working capital of the borrower, because now you have to find money to make it happen, and there is no certainty of the timelines around when will the reimbursement come. So the role that Joby and I can play in this model is, can we create a bridge structure wherein the initial pool to make this processing unit a reality comes from that bridge funding. The unit becomes live. Completion certificate goes to NABARD or SBI for that matter. And then the reimbursement happens, and that reimbursement gets back to repay the bridge funding, and the bridge funding goes back to the pool. So this is one structure that can take care of such funding options which come through the schemes or through the soft sources, but requires a reimbursement structure or requires a bridge structure. Now, the moment we get into the FPO dimension, now FPOs are also, entities of collectives. A set of farmers have come together to make an entity. They are not corporates. So the moment you apply the corporate underwriting criteria, FPOs will never become borrowers. So how do we then underwrite this kind of a lending proposal from the FPO's perspective is where the dimension of the forward and backward linkages come, because these are processors. So let's just step back. As a processor, what are your principal requirements? Your principal requirements are, you need to buy your raw material for your processing, you process, and then you sell the processed good as your finished product and realize the money and get the money back, right? That's a simple cycle. From a finance perspective, what it means is you have to have a solution for payables, and you need to have a solution for receivables. So when you have a solution for payables and receivables is when your working capital comes down, or working capital requirement comes down. And that is where you would be able to shrink the amount of money that is stuck in the entire working capital cycle and make the model lighter on the funding perspective and more efficient from the cost perspective. This is where, again, we need to segregate the interventions that would become the solutions for the payable structure, where more often than not, market linkages in an aggregated manner can actually pave way to reduce the burden of money being stuck in payables. And agriculture being seasonal and cyclical, you often end up investing a lot of money in your raw material because you have to buy it during the season. And in fact, if we are looking at extending the shelf life of the perishable commodities, it also entails that we buy bulk of these commodities during the season and use it over a period. Mind you, we are also looking at making the village processing center operate 365 days a year, right? When you put all of these requirements, the amount that goes as working capital in the payables would be significant. And how do we find solutions in financing instruments that don't put the burden on the village processing center or on the FPO, usually village processing center, because these are working capital structures. How do we find a solution on the payable structure? Second, solutions on the receivable structure are linked to actually the B2B and B2C dimension, because this is where the receivables accrue. Because finally, they are the people who are going to buy the finished product, whether it is a sauce or a ketchup or a raw banana powder, whatever that we are processing, there is a market for that. And their payables are the receivables for the village processing center. So how do you discount those receivables in a timely manner so that your working capital again is not stuck in your receivables in the finished products? So the beauty of an ecosystem approach indeed would be, how do we find financing solutions for each leg of the ecosystem, not necessarily for the borrower, but find a solution for the ecosystem. And that is what would make such large interventions a reality. So I pause here, we'll come back. I would like Joby to add a few things, because he has been spending significant time on the field discussing with some of the constituents that we see in this landscape, and then we take the discussion forward. Joby.
Yeah, so thank you very much. It's spent a significant amount of time lending into these kind of efforts in India. I and Anil have spent a lot of time in ICICI Bank and beyond, financing lots of enterprises in rural India. And Anil beautifully explained about the capital requirement for something like this to succeed. One is the infrastructure cost to be funded. From many sources, we understand there is certain amount of soft capital that can be tapped into. Government has got deep interest in seeing farmers are able to kind of get the benefit. The true owner of lots of these products are farmers. They are the primary producer of anything that we eat and drink, kind of coming from. But unfortunately, they lose the ownership, kind of status pretty fast in the farm gate itself, because of their urgency for money, deeply indebted for the whole agricultural purpose. They borrow at very high interest rate from all informal sources. And there is no regular income to farmer, because a typical farmer has income twice a year, right? While his needs are throughout the year, like anybody else. He has got needs on education, healthcare, every other social needs. But his income is kind of maybe in Kharif and Rabi, when he sells something, that is the time he gets. But all the time he's keep investing, and no bank actually is keen to lend to him, because the very high perceived risk is very high, because kind of these are the category of people if there is no proof of income. It's not like a salaried class or an income tax return customer. In our country of 140 crore people, only 5.5 crore Indians have this whole beautiful document of a salary certificate that can be given. 4.89 crore people only have filed income tax return last year. In that, 3 crore people are salaried class people. So there was only 1.89 crore people who are so-called self-employed and making something tangible to kind of make an income tax payment. This is the sweet spot of any bank. These are the 10 crore people any bank is chasing to kind of fund. Bulk of India is really struggling to kind of prove how am I earning my money. And large number of our farmers, SMEs come from that struggle of proving to someone who can fund them. So one of the ways in which the whole government is trying to spend a lot of money by giving grants to FPCs. There are food processing department wanting to kind of give capital subsidy. If you want to kind of get something up of 80 lakhs, up to 60%, 50%, depending upon whatever is the focus of the ministry. There are on top of that state government supporting food parks. So, but the farmer producer company, anybody up there can't really stand up to claim any of these things. You need number of consultants. That whole web of things are not working very professionally. So we, as the new company, we wanted to kind of really look at how can we kind of really look at farmer income to kind of go up to 10 times. Why I said 10 times, current income, as the NSSO number last year reported, an agricultural household's income is 55,000 rupees. With 55,000 rupees income, no family can survive and enjoy the kind of the facilities that we see anywhere. So 5 lakh could be a decent income, annual income for a 5 to 6 member household if they have to have the proper education, proper health care, and other needs to be met. And 5 lakh is not a lot of money. So the 10x is not too much like a 50 lakhs. We are talking about 55,000 rupees to kind of go to, kind of 5 lakh, 5.5 lakh number. How can that be possible? Any intervention which is to kind of help. These are the inputs to a farming, this thing. One is whole seed, fertilizer, pesticides, and there are certain supply chain working. There is a distributor, dealer level thing, and any interventions can give some, kind of efficiencies, right? I mean, the supply chains could be weak. New age companies can come. This can move to kind of 10%, 20%, 30% efficiency. When the farmer sells also, he lose some money because the marketable surplus of any farmer in this country is about 1 to 2 metric ton. The large buyers needs about thousands of metric ton. So they don't meet in a marketplace. Government created the APMC mandis. They are highly inefficient. It doesn't help the farmer. So therefore, farmer producer companies rightly positioned to aggregate for 1,000 farmers. If 1,000 farmers produce can be aggregated, there can be a, kind of a better supply chain. A lot of technologies can be used. Aggregation is now more virtual aggregation, physical aggregation. It's information, right? If an ITC can know if I can get about 1 lakh metric ton in a place, a lot of things can happen. So all of this would not give 10x. The real 10x can come from value addition, processing. Today, a lot of the farmers' producers are branded by many companies, but they are not the original producers of the. That is where the interest is aligned in seeing, the higher percentage to the rural India, because if they stop producing, forget about any processing. So there has to be interest aligned for the people to stay in farming. Food security is a concern. There are so many people, we need to have something produced here. Therefore, that is in the right intention that, this has to be there. We don't have stories because whom are we competing? The first is to kind of get the infra done. There are lots of challenges about, we have not financed anything on infra because it's easier to finance on the trading side. We can give money to the farmer, FPC, to buy the maize or paddy or wheat and sell because the risk is limited to kind of buying 10 days, 20 days. The price fluctuation in 10, 20 days is not too high and it gets sold. They have to buy and produce something. We are competing with a Unilever and an ITC or somebody in that market. So if you have to access working capital finance to run this every day, if your market is not, competitive enough in the market, then it only ends up in inventory, the financial will get stuck. The only ray of hope here is a brand Amul, right? The taste of India. It is owned by farmers. So can something like that in agri for all other products can come? This looks like a structure, can lead into that dream, and it all comes from that one brand that the Indian consumers will accept it as owned by farmer. And if we can also prove a lot of that money the consumer pay directly go to the farmer or to the farmer producer company is where the connect would be. And there is lots of things needs to kind of get it right. There is this whole processing, funding and all that. To me, the larger thing is because the higher amount of capital is required to kind of procure, process and ship to the market. That's the whole working capital requirement to do that. Today it is sitting in the balance sheets of large companies which are AAA rated companies. These are structures the banking community will take time to understand because what is its ability to kind of take that, produce, and what is the marketability of this brand in the minds of consumers will determine how much finance will come to this. I'm confident that there is a lot of global funds. The climate funds are all focusing about primary producers' interest to be protected. So there is, in that angle, a lot of money can be channelized, but again, it's to kind of building that very strong brand. So I'm only flagging, the kind of the risk elements Anil talked about. If it needs to attract tons of capital to kind of really make it workable, we look into kind of, in my past, when in the banks, when we look at the first question that will be asked is, how strong is the brand? Like when we fund something like a rubber, this thing, it's like a MRF or it's an Apollo tires. The brand commands 20%, 30% market share. Then their procurement of rubber and everything is kind of, the banks are keen to kind of fund it. So that's where the whole crux is. And how do we kind of work up to that beyond solving the whole machinery piece, getting the unit running, is to kind of really creating that strong brand that the consumers would love it. Because of the, the nature of the crowd, I really don't know. I mean, I think it can be kind of more interactive session if you ask more, where are the areas we need more light? Because we have lent in all parts of this money, but can't really, kind of figure out what would be kind of more meaningful and relevant here.
Just I want to add, I understand what both of you have said, the risk finance and whether it is going to be loan or grant or whatever. I think one of the first thing that I will ask question is that in this way, once the investment is made, paying for the cost, will be VPC make money, will franchisor make money, and will the customer be happy with the price? If the fundamentally the business model is work, then financing and finance cost has to be added to that. But I think the first question is if tomato is purchased, let's say at 5 rupees, and if the customer is going to get it at, let's say 15 rupees per kg or whatever number, 20 rupees per kg tomato paste, is there enough money going to be made by everyone? I think that is the fundamental crux. If that is there, then financing is the oiling.
With you, sir. I was about to add to what Joby was saying, using this framework. The more I'm looking at this framework, the more I'm getting excited on the possibilities of how the incentives are well aligned within the players in this entire ecosystem. So let's look at first the franchisor. All of us know in a franchisee structure, it is the responsibility of the franchisor to make sure that all the stakeholders make money. If there is no money to be made in the structure, then the franchisees would not be interested, and hence the distribution or the footprint would not happen. Who would pay money to take the franchisee or to become a franchisee of a brand or a model or a business proposition where there is no money to be made? So with the franchisor being at the center of this entire structure and collaborating the flow of both goods and cash, and ultimately taking the responsibility for sale of commodities, where I see the alignment of incentives between the franchisor and the rest of the players in this particular ecosystem. So let's now look at what are the dimensions that a franchisor would look at to make this happen. First and foremost is the capex that is going in setting up my unit. Is it the most efficient use of money and the investment that is going? And would it deliver the desired result that we are looking at? And hence, this particular cohort of stakeholders that the franchisor would be engaging with, whether it is agri-researchers or the packaging experts or the finance partners, would be critical, because the model at an unit level, at a fundamental unit economics, should be viable financially. So this particular engine becomes extremely important, and that's why the next session and the packaging session are so relevant for this structure to happen. The second one is this structure also beautifully delineates the capex and the incentive alignment for people who are putting capex to the processing dimension of the business, the working capital dimension. FPO, in my view, is better equipped to set up the unit. The reason being that they have the better ability to engage with larger entities like NABARD and banks to be able to borrow, and then most of the FPOs may not have the ability to run the process unit and hence identify the entrepreneur. And yesterday we also learned that if for any reason the entrepreneur does not have the ability to run, the FPO should have the ability to replace one entrepreneur with the other entrepreneur so that the execution part of the enterprise is delineated from setting up the enterprise. So here there is an alignment of who should set up the unit to who should run. The second dimension is the focus on the entire processing as a unit, right? We have one good example to learn from. I will not take the name of the entity, but an entity that did something similar at a reasonable scale in Andhra Pradesh, right? They were looking at buying, and this is not in perishable, this is in grains, buying the grains in wholesale and set up about 1,000 such processing units. Each unit is about 3 lakhs, and buy back the produce and be able to supply to the local distribution center. And they did set up about 1,000 such units in a span of about 3 years and set up significant infrastructure. Now the problem there is they used their resources for setting up the units and ran out of money for the working capital. And there was no soft funding for that, right? NABARD and SBI. But here we have a learning that is already coming in terms of why CapEx is better access through soft funding, right? And in fact, they also got a huge private equity investment, and of course, the working capital is the lubricant, not just the bulk money, right? Now, how do we make sure that this incentive alignment happens? Then comes the dimension of what do we do with the finished product? Again, that goes back to the incentive alignment of the franchisor. It is the franchisor who has to create either a marketplace or find a market for the finished produce. And yesterday we heard Marudam FPO gentleman, Anandan sir, talking about, I have the ability to produce, but I don't have the ability to go to the market, and hence my scale of operations are subdued. It is the incentive alignment between the franchisor and the processor, where the marketing also has to be the responsibility of the franchisor. So that, in a way, is what I understand from this structure, sir, where we are aligning the incentive, and the entire fulcrum of this engagement is where the franchisor has to be the Zubin Mehta. The franchisor has to be the orchestrator. And the franchisor being the funder makes it all the more the franchisor's responsibility to make the model work from a viability perspective. Yes, Dr. Kanchana.
Yeah, good morning.
Sorry, before that, Joby, you want to add anything to this? No?
Good morning, sir. Sir, for getting any financial assistance, they generally request for the DPR. Can you say something about the DPR? And some of the DPR, they are not preparing it properly. That is why they are not getting the fund. Can you say something about that?
You have hit the nail on the head, I would say, right? One of the responsibilities of, especially the last leg of the mentors and tech developers that we have, indeed is to come out with a simple project report, right? And we can have a blueprint of it. Because we are dealing with one commodity, because we are dealing with a specific structure, this can become a template. Once it becomes a template and you demonstrate the viability of the template using 5 or 6 live cases, then rest of it would become a cookie cutter approach, cut, paste and copy. The problem with the current process of DPR is each of them is a Cadillac in itself. If I am setting up a unit, I have to make my own DPR and the dimensions would change. If Joby is setting up a unit, his DPR will change, right? And hence, it would be an independent assessment by the funding agency, for every DPR. But here we are basically going with a bulk requirement, saying, hey, we are looking at setting up about 100,000 such village processing centers. Everything will be standard. Everything will be run by a blueprint. There are people who are aligned from an incentive perspective to make it happen. While the funding will happen to individual units, the ecosystem is what would drive the efficiencies, and hence a blueprint for a DPR. In the absence of it, then each of us would be swimming our own race. Right. Thank you, ma'am.
Very good morning, everyone. I am Mahmood Hussain. I represent NABARD and also NAB Kisan, which is the funding entity or subsidiary of NABARD. So we are primarily speaking on behalf of NAB Kisan. So NAB Kisan's primary mandate is for lending to FPOs, and over the years we have lent to around 2,500 FPOs, and in Tamil Nadu alone we have around 300 plus FPOs as a client. And besides FPOs, we also fund agri startups. Pay Agri, Samunnati, Dwara KGFS, all of us have relationships with us. And thank you to IIT Madras Research Park for inviting us. And since the CFO was not in town, so I have been asked to represent him. So I just like to shed some light with regards to the model which spoke about government. We spoke about government and NABARD support. So just like to shed some light on it because the government's focus, whether it's central government or state government, both of their focus are primarily towards FPO and how we can build up FPOs as a sustainable entity. And Tamil Nadu is one of the most progressive states with regards to FPOs in general, and Tamil Nadu has an exclusive FPO policy, and FPOs are actually categorized as a startup. And Tamil Nadu government had come up with a Tamil Nadu supply chain mechanism project, under which 64 primary processing units have already been set up with NABARD funding across 10 districts, primarily in the western belt and few in the south and delta region. So, and these primary processing units have all the facilities which are needed for processing, and FPO in those clusters, they can actually run these facilities, and most of our clients are already running these primary processing centers, and we provide them working capital support. So besides that, I'd also shed some light with regards, because the focus of the discussion was in Tamil Nadu as one state where we can come up with some viable model. So a couple of schemes of government of Tamil Nadu also, which they are implementing through NAB Kisan. So there's one scheme, mezzanine capital assistance, wherein we provide equivalent to the share capital of the FPO, paid up share capital up to 10 lakhs over a period of 5 years with a coupon rate of 4%. So this we invest in privately placed debentures of the FPO, and FPO can use that fund either for working capital requirements or for their creating infrastructure. That is one. Second is revolving fund assistance, wherein there's an interest subvention model. So whether it's for infrastructure creation or for working capital, so 1/3 of the interest is reimbursed to the FPO. So the funding comes from the government of Tamil Nadu. So that is one thing. And then the third thing is about agri infrastructure fund. So under this scheme, government of India is providing 1 lakh crore of fund through banks and other financing institutions over a period of 10 years. So in this, FPOs is one entity which is eligible. Besides this, there are also entrepreneurs, startups, primary agriculture societies. All of these are also eligible, and NAB Kisan is one of the primarily entities who have lent to FPOs under this model. So this covers primarily post-harvest infrastructure, wherein the primary processing facilities will actually be eligible for funding, and there's an interest cap. 9% is the rate of interest at which we can charge, and then there's also a model of 3% subvention. So effectively at 6% interest, the FPOs can build primary processing units. So there are, because in Tamil Nadu we have seen that a lot of these are already provided as grants. We've not seen so much of uptake, but recently, last 1 year we have seen, because there's a project monitoring unit that has been set up. So FPOs are primarily looking to encash upon those opportunities. Then looking to the second thing, PMFME. So there's also a grant component is also built up in that scheme as well. So with this model, so I think probably there's a place where some of the FPOs have already running these primary processing units which have been funded under TNSCM, and then probably there could be a model where they can lease out or have tie-up with marketing teams like with you or with Samunnati or with Pay Agree, wherein they can take care of, as a contract farming also probably can be looked at, and so FPOs can probably look at procuring aggregation can be the role of the FPO, and then probably marketing it and taking it to the last mill can probably where the local entrepreneur or the franchisee can actually come into the picture.
Thank you very much. This is very encouraging that we already have several enablers to make this a reality. And of course, the cost of funding would certainly be a critical component. And very happy to hear that there are several schemes that can reduce the burden of the cost on the constituents. Thank you for that. We will be engaging with you. Today, you are there for the whole day, right? Would request you to be there, because second half is where we get into the actionables, and NABARD would be a very, very important constituent in that. Thank you. Rajiv, can you please, in addition to whatever your point here is, can you also share how have you been, as Pay Agree, engaging with the processors? Because Professor's question around how do you make the processing viable at the cheapest of the, rather at the most viable price point is easy. But when we are putting a constraint that the farmer should get a better return, and making the processing unit a viable unit would put the burden of value add and the viable model around the value add a responsibility on us. So, can you please share?
Thanks, Anil. So before that, I just had one question in terms of, now in this entire model, it will also be good to look at where all finance is needed, right? So one, if you look at it, if you're going to set up a processing center, there is a CapEx requirement like what you said, and how all we can get the CapEx. One is, of course, under the Agri-Infrastructure Fund, which, NABARD can provide. The other critical area is when you procure, let's say tomato, from the farmers, are we going to pay the money and take it? Or is it going to be on credit?
It has to be money on the table, or else it will not work.
Yeah.
Exactly,
So
on the
this is-
table. Exactly. Has to be on the table.
Yeah. So this is one area where financing institutions
course.
can play a very vital role.
Yes.
Similarly, on the other side, once the produce is ready, right, most of the buyers, if you look at it, they don't do cash and carry. I mean, it's mostly, again, on credit, right? So that is another area where, again, financing institutions can play a very, very vital role.
Again, the franchisor has to play the role of paying the money to the processing unit while taking the goods out.
Yes.
I think basically expecting VPC to be able to handle finance is not a meaningful thing. Franchisors' primary responsibility to handle the whole finance change completely. B2C in that sense is excellent in the sense that you can get money immediately on delivery. Okay? And B2B, there is still this issue of whether there is going to be money immediately available. But I think one of the key role of franchisor, if you see, first role is overall business model works. Number two, making sure the finance is there from one end to the other. And number three, quality. These are the three main roles of finance for a franchise.
No, I agree.
In other words, each one of us have to do what we are good at doing. And the one that the processing center needs to be good at doing is process.
I agree. I completely agree with you. To answer to your question, Anil, in terms of, the way Pay Agree model works is, we work with processors primarily and support them on quality, procuring quality raw materials from the farm gate. Let's say if you're talking about, one of the processors with whom we work is into onion paste. This is a B2B product. It's not available B2C. So what we do is we procure this onion from the farm gate. It could be from Nashik or from Karnataka, based on the specification that he gives, supplies to him. And once he converts that into a paste, and he specializes in retort packing. Somebody was mentioning yesterday about retort packing. So this has a larger shelf life. Right? I mean, that's a specialty of retort without adding any preservatives. So once the product is ready, we also support him on the distribution aspects. The whole concept is that when we support him on the distribution, he's able to kind of create or get access to larger market, not just restricted to India market alone, but also globally. So this is a win-win situation. The more the market we create, the more the raw material he needs, which again we support, right? So this is the model in which we work, and I think something very similar is what we are probably looking at doing it as part of the model what Professor has suggested here. Thank you.
So I would actually request Cholian to share his experience of the last 15 years, a combination of the processing and funding, and why both coming together in a seamless fashion is an important metric for success. It would be important for us to learn from your experience.
So I am Sollin Selvan. So I am basically out of Perambalur, district Perambalur. So I have some sort of experience in this model actually. So in my district, we grow two products, that is maize and small onions. So we coined our brand name as Cornions. So I'm just sharing my case study. So we can relate to this model actually. So initially, with my district collector support, we started a cornflakes manufacturing unit. My district collector idea was to make corn which is 12 to 15 rupees, and he want to valuate that product to 300 rupees, something similar to this village processing center. But we can't able to get through that. First and second year we failed a bit. So then we get into onion. In onion, we peeled the onion, cut down the top and tail, vacuum pack it in the year 2016-17, and we started selling to the Chennai major restaurants like A to B, Saravana. So there were huge market gaps like that middleman. So going to Trichy market, Chennai market, the price was doubled in Chennai. So it was very successful. Initial year we did around 1 crore of revenue, the next year 2 crores, 4 crores. Now we are doing around 10 crores. We employ around 80 to 100 people, 1,200 to 1,300 farmers we have. And the interesting part is it is a private company owned by me. But in the year 2015, initially we started as a FPO only. So this is kind intention, this I want to share with the FPO. So initially there is no bandwidth for the FPO to start such kind of products. There were a lot of technology gaps was there. So after 2 years of iterating in FPO, then I started my own organization. So I don't want to drop out that idea. So I think that maturity level came now after 5-6 years. This FPO will get now because there are a lot of bandwidth and lot of training sessions were going on for FPO. So this kind of model is viable at major cases. So I specifically request this FPO to do the groundwork very well, which product is marketable, so that we need to set up that product as a village processing center. At that time, there is no product called a peeled small onion, but we tried we iterated and we have tested and it come up very well. Now we are doing around 10 crores revenue in that model. Thank you.
Sorry, you also mentioned that not having a support on
simply.
marketing dimension.
So when we do as a FPC, we supposed to pay the farmer immediately.
Correct.
So farmer doesn't know whether they won't worry about whom I am selling, whether it is FPC or trader. They want money on the same day. If I am selling to A to B, Saravana or Sangeetas or whoever it may be, even Payagri was our customer at that time, they will definitely take 15, 20, 30 days payment cycle. So that FPC don't have that bandwidth to, do that business in a good way. So then only we have changed that FPC model to a private limited model actually. So that sort of issue is there actually. As I told earlier, we need to find out the right model and the business segment which will be successful, which will be like scalable. Right. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. So 2-3 validations. One, the fact that you have to put money on the table for the farmers is an important dimension. Second, machinery that is required to be able to do the processing in a viable way is the second one. Third, of course, he did not mention today, he was saying that his cornflakes could not compete with large brands. So creating a brand here will also be an important dimension that a franchisor should be looking at, taking the responsibility for. so that there is a brand recall and brand recognition, right? Thank you again for sharing your journey. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So, hello, I'm Gagandeep Kang from Christian Medical College, Vellore, not in the food and nutrition space at all. I was really interested in your story. The question I have is how much is the value add from taking an onion to topping and tailing and providing an onion? What is the price differential between farm gate and to the provider?
Currently, it is around 200% because while selling a raw small onion from a farmer to the end user itself is 100% now. For example, 30 rupees at the farm gate. So maybe at one of the biggest places like More Lanes, they are purchasing at 60 rupees. If we sell the peeled onion means it will be 90 rupees. But we have some difficulties in shelf life. The shelf life only is 48 hours. So we are trying to increase that shelf life. Without any preservatives, it's only 48 hours. So B2C model won't work out in that. So we are doing B2B now.
So there is a 100% economic accretion in terms of the value add, ma'am. Right. Okay. Anyone else from both insights as well as? Yes, please.
You converted an FPO into a private limited, right? What were the disadvantages you saw in an FPO so that you made the conversion?
So I supposed to tell in the open forum. So in 2013-14, there was not much knowledge about this FPCs for the farmers, first of all. So secondary, after organizing, there was some 8 to 10 committee members and the chairman kind of thing. So it's just like a political party where everyone want to be a member, everyone take decision kind of thing. So unilateral decision cannot be taken at the time. Taking risk is the entrepreneurship. So ultimately, FPO should be a kind of entrepreneurship where we want to take decision. Yeah, sorry, you raised your hand, sorry. So taking decisions was very tough at that time. So I was at around 21, 22. So seniors, we can't able to match the decisions of the seniors. So I supposed to come out of that and take this decision. And that also taken my district collector want to me do this model ultimately, whether someone want to do. So that's the reason we came out.
And did they have any dictation over the product, or you had clear idea this is the product you wanted?
No. Actually, this model was proposed by Adayarananda Bhavan managing director. Just like that, he told and we tried and it came out. We iterated 2 to 3 years one product and it failed. So things happen like that actually. We need to believe the instinct.
But what are the advantages you are seeing in this system that you are doing right now? What are the advantages that you are seeing in the private limited right now?
So I will just answer one more point to that because there was while starting that conflicts project, we want to give some security to the banker at that time. So at that time, the FPO can't able to give the security kind of thing to a banker. So that sort of issues were there at that time. I don't know how it's getting resolved now actually. So even now FPOs facing difficulties. I am just working with several FPOs. Still FPOs facing difficulties getting loans from the banks actually, practically. There are several attractive schemes are there, but practically in ground level, there are several difficulties FPOs are facing to raise capital. Even working capital seems to be fine. I think some sort of support is there, but capital infrastructure means they face some difficulties actually. You came up with some other questions.
This question was not dealt with yesterday. I had it in mind, though somebody mentioned FPO. Basically, the nature of organization of the FPO is such that while in one hand it is a farmers organization, the very nature make it not an entity which can drive a business.
Correct.
There can easily be conflicts inside, and sometimes, someplace it may work out well, but long term, always working out best is not something that we can count on. And therefore, when this was thought about, if you see, we have given FPO the ownership, because FPO represents the farmers. but we have not given FPO the control. It is the local entrepreneur who runs the VPC. I think this is critical. Has to be an entrepreneur who will put his or her life into making this work. I think, so this is the important point, and your experience more or less adds that.
Validates that. Yeah, yeah.
To add a final point to that, now I am taking several sessions for FPO. Whatever I tell to the FPO people is, kindly put a director or CEO as a youngster, someone from your family or a son of a farmer who is 20 to 30s, who are educated, graduated, so that they can take risk and work on that. But anyone more than 45, 50 can't able to understand this sort of new business models actually.
Even if they put somebody today as a CEO, the day that person starts making money, some other person will come and say, no, he is taking. So I think create separate organizations. The world over experience has shown that these collectives work for short period of time. FPO is like a collective. Don't make the business being driven by this. So they have stake, they should make money. That money they can do whatever if they get dividend or whatever, they can do what they want. But operation should be done by VPC.
Sure. And there are at least 3 examples that have worked at scale in this structure in the FPO world. One is Sahyadri Farms. They engage with the FPOs in relation to procuring and giving them a higher price. Processing is not their problem, marketing is not their problem, and they don't have any say in terms of the markets. Second is Madhya Bharat Consortium. Only till procurement they do that. They engage with the FPOs. Beyond that, the consortium takes over. Guj Pro, right? Something very similar. So maybe next time when you speak to or when you take a session for the FPOs, you may want to give an idea that, hey, you may continue to be an owner, but bring someone who is a partner, not an employee, but a partner who is also invested, who has a ownership. And it is the partner's responsibility to be able to make the processing or make the business viable, right? Has to be, hunger with independence, hunger with the ability to take individual decisions.
Sure,
And
sir.
yesterday we also heard, if for any reason the local entrepreneur is not the right guy, it's easier to replace one with the other. But if you take the responsibility of running the show, which is also a problem that we have here, at times this constituent becomes the implementer. You have a challenge there. Anyhow, ma'am? Illai.
Yes, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So earlier you have followed the business to customer, the marketing channel phase. Now you have changed to business to business. So are you supplying the processed products to retailers or wholesalers?
No.
To whom you are giving?
So B2B means it's only to the restaurants.
Restaurants. Then it is a model of business to consumer. Okay, the restaurants won't say market whatever you are giving.
No, I'm
So
not.
They are the end users.
Yes.
Actually, in the slides also there is a mistake. It has to be written down business to consumers.
Here,
Because
ma'am,
the
there
restaurant
is.
people are using that processed products.
No, there
There
is.
is no further sales of the particular product. They are using it. End user of that processed product is B2C. The restaurant won't sell the processed onion. They are using it. End user of the product. So the hotel, restaurant, cafe will be under B2C.
So
Well, it
there is
is-
a concept called Horeca.
Correct.
Hotel,
Restaurant and cafes.
restaurants,
Cafe.
Cafes.
cafe,
Cafe.
Yes, that's it.
and
Canteens.
or
Canteens also come
hotel,
there.
restaurant. So, yes, they are consuming the product, but they themselves are selling the product, but the food to somebody else. So therefore, they are as an entity, they are a business entity. Now let me tell you, there is a big difference.
No, sir,
One
actual.
second, can you let me
Yes, sir.
speak? What is the big difference? If you come to me as a household consumer, end consumer, and give something, say, give me 10 rupees and I'll have to give you 10 rupees. When you give it to hotels or to a restaurant, they will take it and they will say, we will give you 10 rupees later. I think that make it a B2B, in the sense that there is a financing required there. B2C, there is no financing. We need to differentiate this. We have often found that even the hotels don't pay for, let's say, 2 months. So to keep that differentiation, we have put both B2B and B2C. And I think that must be understood. If you sell everything to customer who directly, immediately pays you money, there is no such issue.
And,
You
and,
understand?
and one is not that the
no.
exclusion of the other, ma'am. These
Actually,
are
so
segments.
whatever may be the processed products, if I'm using it for producing something, okay, so I'm the user. Even in a home also, the processed products, we are buying it. And again, we are making and we are giving to our kids. It is not to B2B. So we are directly using it, it is B2C.
I think the important thing is,
Yeah.
do you give cash
Yes.
for
Do you sell later or you consume
cash,
it?
Do you give cash for
Correct.
what you get, or do you take it in credit?
Yeah, you are a consumer or further
Consumer
seller.
always pay cash.
Correct.
To B, can pay cash, often takes it on credit. I think there is the whole economics will work out differently, and that's the reason this differentiation need to be kept in mind. But of course, you can consider it's the final end user. They are end users.
We'll pick it up. We'll pick it up during the tea break because it's a dimension of.
So as a
you know,
teacher, we always
semantics.
teach the Oreca is under B2C.
Sure, we
Because
will pick that up.
from the pulp, if they are making any jam or something, okay, so with that tomato sauce or the pulp, using that as the another product. Say for example, wheat flour, bread. Then it is processing, then we can say B2B. But for the food preparations, they are also adding some other more ingredients. So we cannot say it is, okay sir, okay.
No,
later.
which is correct. But
Yes.
ultimately,
It is my understanding, that's it.
no, ultimately is the product that you have made, is it being consumed or is being sold?
Yeah.
If it is being consumed, it is B2C. If it is being sold, then it is B2B. Because somebody else is paying for it. That's it. Anyhow, it's
Yeah,
matter of semantics. But the idea is both wholesale and retail. Is that okay? Thanks. Anyone else?
Excuse me, sir. Basic doubt I have when investing the.
Sir, konjo.
Sir, I have one basic doubt. Here, each share 33% for all these three stakeholders.
Correct. Correct.
So, in case, as you said, the FPO is willing to run their VPC on their own without any local entrepreneur, then what would be the share for two? I mean, franchisor and FPO.
So in this structure, as Professor reiterated as a validation of his own thinking based on the experience of E. Sanday, it is advisable that the FPO does not run the processing center.
Okay.
In this model, there is a local entrepreneur who is responsible to run it.
So all these three stakeholders.
All
will be
these
there,
three,
must.
that is why one-third.
Okay, sir.
It also gives a good hedge against the execution capability of both these. If the FPO is not good, the execution will not suffer because the local entrepreneur is still hungry to make it work. If both are not good, the franchisor has the responsibility to bring another franchisee to be able to make this a
So
successful
it's
enterprise.
mandatory to, lease out to the local enterprise.
That is the role. Each one of us will play the role that we are good at. Is the basic premise of this structure.
Okay, so then second clarification is that investing, this is a share 33% means investing share is also 33% or
It's the
returns?
ownership.
Then means
ownership
all
of
these three should
33%.
equally invest.
Usually it would not be much because it's a seed capital. And this is where the incubators come in. Correct.
Yeah, equally
1,000
invest.
rupees each.
Yes, sir.
That's where incubators should come in. He mentioned about, the
Why-
matching grants and things like
Yes,
that.
sir. Why? Because the FPO will get finance from any bank or government organizations.
Correct.
But the local entrepreneur
Will not.
he has to pay
That-
from his own money.
You are absolutely
Similarly,
right.
franchisor should also raise their own money. So these three partners should equally invest so as
Correct.
to get equal.
No, but I think there is an important difference. the shareholding comes from the initial capital.
Correct.
Let us say it is 33,000 rupees for each. That does not operate. Actually, to operate this, you may require 25 lakhs. So the rest of it will all finance will become either FPO will bring as a machinery, or the FFCG startup will bring the money either as a loan or as equity, and they will invest.
So
Sir, in that
ownership
case-
and funding are two different things, sir.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Ownership is the initial seed capital. The
That
funding
means-
requirement will be a combination of all these.
Okay, that's
Three
correct.
entities.
So FPOs should invest actually by borrowing money from bank or any financier.
To set up the unit, FPO will have to set up the unit and then lease it out.
Okay, sir. So in that case, sorry to say this, in case any failure happens, the FPOs are not willing to take up, the whole system fails in a particular location.
Correct.
We'll be having hundreds and thousands of units.
Correct.
Say for example, around 10 units, they are unable to run this. So
Correct, correct.
in that case, who will repay the borrowed money and all this? Who will
Okay,
be the
I think, let me intervene here. FPO will hopefully get some government and NABARD support. FPO will hopefully get some NABARD support and all that. They will own the machinery. If this does not work out, they will give it to some other VPC. The machinery belongs to the FPO. They lease it to VPC. The machinery does not belong to this. Machinery belongs to FPO.
And
my
also-
question is not
Also
as
look
a-
at, one second sir, look at franchisor and franchisee. If you take McDonald's as an example, it is McDonald's responsibility to make sure that that particular Velachery unit of McDonald's makes profit. If they are not able to, then they bring someone else. In this case, if the FPO is not able to, then the local entrepreneur needs to be changed.
In that case, the FPO will get,
We'll get back the machinery.
machinery.
Take the machinery.
Then
Or you do whatever
what
you
they
want.
will do with that machinery, because they want to disconnect
Some other
that
processing
business.
can happen. See, first and foremost, you are talking of a failure.
Yeah.
Failure would
Maybe-
have- failure
maybe
would
we
have-
to anticipate
Correct.
one or
Failure
two
would have
failures.
10 reasons, right? You have to sit and talk, saying, is it the intention or capability? If it is capability, accentuate with support. If it is intention, then we have to sit and talk, saying, what do you want to do?
But
It is on. It is on.
to set up the, VPC center, it's a primary responsibility of FPO. Suppose I have an FPO.
Under this franchisor structure, so it's just not FPO. The franchisor is also equally responsible in the selection of the FPO who has the capability to make that a success. It's not that any FPO who has a processing center becomes a franchisee. No. Franchisor-franchisee arrangement means there is a capability testing ab initio. That's a
Okay, sir.
prerequisite.
For example, for this entire whole unit, set up the processing center, it needs, for example, 10 lakh rupees.
Correct.
The machinery component may be around 4 lakh rupees, which can be invested
Correct.
by the FPO.
Correct.
What about remaining 6 lakh rupees?
Franchisor
Whether
will have to-
franchisor will give, or a local entrepreneur?
No, franchisor, again, go back here. The franchisor now is working with finance partners.
Okay.
So NABARD, and this gentleman elaborated the number of schemes and the cheaper funding that is available.
Okay, sir.
The
That is
franchisor-
sourcing the fund from government organizations or available sources or any financier.
Including the finance.
Here, what is the investment component made by either local entrepreneur or by the franchisor?
Sir, ideally,
Will they
yeah.
pay, from their
these-
source or funding source, or they will not, spare any finance?
See, ideally in any structure, like there is the formal structure of if a enterprise need 1 crore, and if 3 people are coming, if they have to have 33, each of them bring 33 lakhs each.
Yes.
Then you get equal.
Yes, yes.
That is a formal equity structure everybody understands.
Yes, sir.
But there are many ways in which this can be tweaked, right?
Okay.
If you say this partner, somebody is saying that they are very critical, Their strength is not to bring capital. But without they bringing the commodity or the capital, all the three may decide that even if he doesn't bring equal capital, he may still have 33% stake. Right. So here in this case, this 1 crore is required, 33 lakh is required to buy the machinery, processing machinery,
Yes.
which the FPC got it through some loan or government grant.
Yes.
Their equity contribution would be through by giving this machinery to this whole project,
Yes, sir.
saying that I will have this thing. So
Yeah.
I think this is slightly we can think about and
That
Yeah.
means
So-
equal investment
yeah.
partners.
No, I
needs
think,
to
I
also-
think we are confusing. Is there a pen? Can we take an example? Huh? Yeah. Let me take an example, and this is only an example. There can be a possibility that initial capital to set up VPC is only small amount, let's say 2 lakhs. So, total money capital is only 2 lakhs. Huh? That's all right. So, FPO will invest 66K. A local entrepreneur will invest 66K, and franchisor startup, I mean I'll call it FMCG, will spend 66K. Now, in 2 lakhs you cannot do anything much. This is only how a company VPC is formed. After VPC is formed, this is there, then the next stage. FPO brings in, let's say 7 lakhs rupees machinery and leases it at rupees 10K per month to this entity. That's I'm just throwing some numbers. All numbers can be changed. Okay? The next important thing, can you raise this a bit? Next important thing. Now, working capital and other things will be required, electricity and all that. Let us say another 7 lakh is required. I'm just throwing some number. So, should be 7 lakh working capital. This is organized by FMCG through some bank. I'm not even saying subsidy. Here there may be a subsidy. And this is a working capital. Without FMCG, bank may not lend because they don't know the village entrepreneur. They are very uncertain about FPO. They have burned their hands in the past. It is a franchisor who will give the guarantee. And then that money will get in, and there will be rights that the franchise, the FMCG company has, that if things don't work out, they will change the local entrepreneur. All those will be agreement done. And this is only some numbers I have thrown. What I find is, this is extremely critical thing that agricultural college, or I will say even engineering college, should teach. This is the fundamentals of financing. Now, look at it. 10,000 rupees is expenditure here. This is the working capital. For working capital, they have to pay interest. So suppose this is per month. So per month, they may have to pay, let's say, 10,000 rupees interest. So 10,000 rupees interest and 10,000 rupees lease charges. So this unit has to make more than 20,000 rupees to just per month to just break even. So out of the total money that they get in getting the tomato, they have to now process it, sell it at a price, taking into account all of this, taking into account some profit. So I can now write down, let us say it does 1 ton of tomato. I'm just throwing some number. I don't even know the numbers. Cost is so much. Electricity cost and operation cost is so much. The cost of loan is this much. Leasing or machinery cost is this much. This is therefore the sell price. And again, since the selling will be not done directly by the franchisor, the FMCG company, they will say this is amount is the cost of sales. All that has to be taken into account before price is decided. This is what I call business model. And I think one of the first tasks that the three of them, Samunnati, KiVi, and Agri, Pay Agri has to do is to present to us that the business model is strong for, let's say, tomato puri making, and then for something else, and for something. If business model is not strong, we have to have margin and profit. Things may go wrong, so we have to take that into account. If the business model is not right, it will never scale. Our objective is not to set up 1 or 2 units. Our objective will be to set up 100,000 such units. There may be, this may cost little less because this may partly come as a grant. So it may not cost 10K, it may only be charged 5K. So that is all right. All those things has to be taken into account. Fine tuning is very, very important. One then has to negotiate it with everybody. One can tell Nabard, see, we will create so much of business, but please arrange some grant for us. There are, fortunately, see, grant or aid, there is some amount of grant and aid is available for enabling, because this will benefit the farmers, this will remove the waste, some amount of grant is available. Even well-to-do people may give certain grants. Like we donate to our temples, even individually can sort of say, these are our temples of the future. So we may actually put some money saying, doesn't matter, let them start generating, because month after month then they will make money. And I think that's a key issue. Okay? This kind of simple economics, and we need to understand depreciation, interest rate, cost of operations. I think it's very critical that we do these kind of things to every student. Otherwise, they don't often understand. We have to take into account, can you go back to the slide? So far, we have not talked about the cost of know-how. If you look at, even the cost of know-how is important. Where is that slide? Keep that slide always on. Go to full slide. These people are giving expertise here. They should get something in return. That cost also has to be taken into account out here. Ultimately, every cost has to be taken into account. Nothing prospers unless there is a strong business model. Business model that I talked about is to work each and everything out with some margins. Okay? I think this is critical and I wanted to intervene.
Thank you, sir. So we are on the time now. So we break for tea and then assemble back.
Yeah, this session will somewhat continue in the last session also.
Correct, sir.
So I think we'll break for tea.
Sure.
But I think, again, I wanted to point out, there are a lot of students, researchers, even I think our biggest failure is that we don't understand business or business model. Business model, all costs has to be taken into account. And there may still be margin. Then carrying out the operation. Let me tell you, running a business is non-trivial. This is running a business. And we have taken into account, why did we make it a franchisor model? This kind of tough business, frankly speaking, expecting a village entrepreneur to do it in the beginning, not possible. Of course, tomorrow the village entrepreneur, if the person is very smart, if somebody like him is there, they may become this tomorrow. After doing 2, 3, for 10 years, running a few franchisee, they may say, oh, I will set up a new company, FMCG startup. That comes from experience. FPO is not the right entity, according to me, because of interests not being aligned. Today it is aligned, tomorrow it may get misaligned. And then politics get into it. Let's avoid that kind of structure. We really want to help farmers. That is the only, that's a clear-cut objective. Okay? 10x to rural income is what we want. And I think this basically is the formulation of 10x to rural income. And we must all realize, whether we are incubator or processing expert, packaging expert or machinery expert or researchers, all are finally benefiting the rural areas, the farmers, which will benefit the nation. Okay? I think that is what we need to do. Thank you. Thank you. And let's have a cup of tea.